You may know the broad outlines of St. Augustine history, the fort, Ponce de Leon, but some of the most fascinating facts often fall through the cracks. And to explore some of these lesser known stories, we're joined by First Coast News anchor and reporter and unofficial St. Augustine historian, Jessica Clark. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
And Roger Smith, outreach manager at the St. Augustine Historical Society and assistant professor of history at Flagler College. Hey, Roger.
Hey, I'm not at the Historical Society anymore.
Oh, no kidding.
No, I'm the park historian at the Fountain of Youth now.
So that's just a piece of history.
Yes.
All right. Well, so the St. Augustine History Festival, annual festival, got underway yesterday.
Mhm.
So really no better time than now to explore some of the fun facts from the city's past. Let's start with one of the city's most iconic structures, the lighthouse.
The
Okay.
lighthouse. Well, so I was intrigued to learn that at one point in St. Augustine's history, there were two lighthouses standing at the same time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just for, 2 weeks or anything short period like that. It was years.
Right.
Right?
Right. They began constructing the lighthouse we know in 1871 because it became clear that the old lighthouse was going to fall down. And it was sinking into the sea, the soil was eroding, and the beach was eroding. And so they finished construction in 1874 and then basically just waited for the baby to be born and the lighthouse to fall. And in 1880, it finally fell.
They just waited for it to fall into the sea.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can still see part of it
Really?
today.
If you go up to the observation deck at low tide, you can still see the Coquina Foundation.
So if I'm standing on the lighthouse and I'm looking east towards the ocean
Mhm.
and the Salt Run, where do I look from that vantage point?
You look toward the water, toward Salt Run, just if you're facing due east, it's just off to your left a little bit, not
Oh,
much.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if this is accurate, so let's sort this out. But I have been told when I'm standing on the pier by the yacht club, you can even look down into the water and see some of it.
Oh, that might be. I
I
don't know. I haven't tried that.
I don't know if that's just local lore or just what, but it's there, and
Probably
you can
so.
you can certainly see it.
It's interesting that sea level rise was kind of impacting the city even as
Mhm.
far back as 1871.
Well,
Right.
and that whole beach, that 4 miles of beach that's now Anastasia State Park, wasn't there until the 1940s because it used to be Anastasia Island was the barrier island. And then when the Coast Guard took over during World War II, Coast Guard said, we can't be corkscrewing our way out of the harbor to get out to the ocean to chase submarines. So they're the ones who dredged the current entrance that we have now. And so when that sand was dredged, it all wanted to go somewhere, and it formed that island.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so there's an interesting theory. There could be actually shipwrecks underneath the sand there at Anastasia Island.
Oh wow!
So the history of the lighthouse is varied and deep and multi-layered, but there is this story about a former mayor actually stealing the light from the lighthouse.
Yes.
Tell us about this.
Well, Paul Arnaud, who was the mayor of St. Augustine during the Civil War, he was a Southern sympathizer. And when the Union took over St. Augustine in 1862, he had the lens at our lighthouse and down in Daytona. Had the lenses disassembled and were buried.
Buried.
Because he
Yeah.
didn't want them to be assisting Union troops as they.
Exactly.
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
And how did they recover it?
They threatened him with life imprisonment.
And so I could just see him going out and digging them up himself.
Right.
No, I don't know if he dug them up himself. Did he?
I don't know.
But he dug 'em up.
He had to point them out to somebody. And I have a special love for the lighthouse. That's where I met my wife.
Oh,
Yeah. So that'll always be near and dear.
oh, that's wonderful.
I'm glad the light is back in there. Then.
Yeah.
And
For many reasons.
It's faced other threats. I remember, kind of in the early 90s, there was discussion about, getting the original, is it a Fresnel
Fresnel.
lens? Yeah, put back in the lighthouse because it had been replaced with a beacon by the Coast Guard at some point. So it wasn't even a lighthouse with the original light for a while.
No, actually, the original light that went in 1874 is still there. In, I want to say 1981, sometime in the early 80s, somebody shot, decided to take target practice at it. And if I remember correctly, they broke 14 panes of the Fresnel lens, and those had to be replaced. But that is the original light that's in there now.
So the light that was replaced, there's the lighthouse, then there's the lightkeeper's house,
Yes.
Hmm.
which has gone through a few lives itself in terms of having, whether it was going to be preserved, whether it was going to be preserved historically. There was a time when it caught fire.
Yeah, it burned down in the early 80s. And that was when, oh gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. I can't remember the women's group's name that bought the property.
Oh,
The
Junior
Junior
League.
League.
Junior League. Oh gosh, forgive me, ladies. Yeah, they became the conservators and took over the restoration and the maintenance and the rebuilding of the keeper's house. And finally, not that long ago, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, the property was officially presented to them as their property.
So, if you're just joining us, we're talking about some of the lesser known facts from St. Augustine history, and you can join our conversation live on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. I want to move on now to a really interesting topic that, Jessica, you have been looking into about Diamond Lil.
Oh yeah, Diamond Lil. Well, so there. I have learned because of Roger that there are two Diamond Lils, and so I always thought that the Diamond Lil that came to St. Augustine was the original Diamond Lil, but Roger has so kindly taught me that she wanted to be and told others that she was the Diamond Lil of ill repute from the West.
Even went to the trouble of having a diamond stud put in her tooth.
Just like the real, or I should say original,
Right.
Diamond Lil. So maybe we'll start with the original Diamond Lil, Roger.
Yeah, the original Diamond Lil had she was a madam of a brothel up in the Yukon, I believe in Dawson City. And she eventually, when the gold rush played out, she moved her house down to Seattle, where she died of, STD type of diseases and that kind of a thing.
Yikes.
Our Diamond Lil,
Meaning St. Augustine's Diamond Lil.
Luella de McConnell, she came in 1900, and she had basically taken on the persona of telling people her nickname up in the Yukon was Diamond Lil, and she had the diamond stud in her tooth, and it was a very over-the-top type of personality. The original Diamond Lil is who Mae West patterned her stage presence after.
Wow.
Yeah, so all the people in St. Augustine knew is that this lady who was so brash and so outspoken, and she came into town with more money than women were supposed to have in the year 1900, they didn't accept her, and they just didn't like her at all.
Now, she owned the property that is now the Fountain of Youth.
Right.
And she really built on the idea and enhanced the idea that the Fountain of Youth in Ponce de Leon, Juan Ponce de Leon, had stopped there to check out some life-generating water there.
Right.
And so she was the one who really kind of built that story up.
Yeah, I have pictures of kind of just a wooden gazebo type structure with a 5-cent sign from like 1907,
get in.
where people would, especially could come over from the Ponce de Leon Hotel, and they could get a sip of the water for a nickel. They could buy exotic fruit like oranges, and grapefruit. And one of the big things was she had a photographer there who would take people's pictures in front of rose bushes, because it was February and you're not supposed to have rose bushes. And what a strange land this is.
Wow. And so she really kind of created the Fountain of Youth, the whole concept of it, which was a major tourist attraction at the time and really continues to be.
And continues to be, and the story still exists.
Yeah,
wink, wink.
We're coming up on 100 years of the Fraser family's ownership of the Fountain of Youth. Walter Fraser bought it from her estate in 1927.
Oh, okay. From Diamond Lil's estate.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, she died in a car accident.
So she ended up having a number of stories that she would tell around town. As you say, she was kind of known to be a little bit brash and inventive.
Good way to put it.
Wow, that was awesome.
But did she create a story about finding a cross there?
Well,
Yes.
and that's the
Well,
thing. It's the coquina cross, 15 stones down, 13 across, and it was discovered in 1909. The problem is she didn't do it in the scientifically correct manner. She said that she had found this. One of her workers was digging and doing maintenance work, and he discovered these stones.
laying in the ground.
Yes,
Yeah, we're
yes.
talking about a cross built
Uh-huh.
out of stones in the
Yeah,
ground. Yeah.
same cross you see out there today. And but she claimed she cleaned it all off and said, "Eureka! Look at what I found." And a lot of because the town didn't like her, when she yelled "Eureka," they yelled "hoax," because scientists, archaeologists didn't come out and make the discovery the right way and that kind of a thing. She should have left it alone and let them come in, and then it would have been irrefutable.
So do you think it's real or do you think it's a fake?
What? No, I don't think it was a fake. What I found, I spent 2.5 years at the Fountain of Youth doing research there. The Fraziers hired me to come out, and they were unbelievable. I told them, I said, "You may not like what I find," and they said, "We're okay with that. We want to know the truth." And what they do have, though, is in 1904, Luella her workers had found this kind of an ostrich egg size and shaped salt cellar, which is where they used to put salt and keep it, and it had neat engraving on it and things like that. Inside the salt cellar was a vellum parchment. Vellum is finely smoothed animal skin, and they would write on that a lot of times because it would preserve better than paper,
They being
being the Spanish.
okay.
And there is on this vellum, Luella had it translated in 1912, and Walter Frazier had it translated again in 1953. And one was translated here, the other in 1953 took place in Philadelphia, and the two translations were one word apart. And the vellum, basically, I don't have it memorized because it's in very archaic Spanish and the way they phrase things, but basically said, this is where Ponce de Leon was. And the funny thing is we don't know where the salt cellar is. That's been lost over the years. But in a glass frame about this big, there's about a foot, in length and about 4 inches across. The Fraziers have the actual vellum,
Oh wow.
and they sent it off to the University of Arizona at Tucson and had it investigated, and everything fits as far as the age of the vellum, the writing style, everything about it. The only thing that they could do to prove it even more was they could actually test the age of the lead in the ink, but they would have had to burn about 25% of it.
Oh my goodness.
And
Oh, yeah.
that's their
That
smoking
checks
gun
out,
as far as
yeah.
I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears because you made a really important historic discovery yourself, Roger, recently. And we think of the name George Washington having a lot to do with the founding of our country, but we don't usually think of it as having much to do with St. Augustine. So,
Yeah.
Jessica, you covered this.
Right. Well, Roger is so great because he'll just be talking and then he'll drop this golden egg on you, and you'll go, "What?" So one day, just talking with him, he said, "Oh yeah, and in George Washington's letter about St. Augustine." I said, "What?" So this is 1775, right, Roger?
December 18th.
And it involves this confiscation of some letters, and George Washington, of course, on the Revolution side, he finds out about this confiscation of letters, and so then he decides to take action. And Roger, I'm going to let you do the rest.
Okay. There's a letter in the Library of Congress, and Washington is writing to John Hancock, who is the president of the Continental Congress, and letting them know that the day before, on December 17th of 1775, they had confiscated a packet of letters that were destined for the governors in the Floridas and in the Caribbean. And in the letters, they discovered that the British were stockpiling quoting Washington, arms and munitions in the castle and barracks in Augustine, and proceeds to ask Congress for an army to invade East Florida and capture St. Augustine.
And
Wow.
of course, the castle would be
Yes,
the fort.
the fort.
The fort in downtown St. Augustine,
Yeah,
the Castillo de
and-
San Marcos.
And
Which was pro-British and therefore his enemy.
All
Right.
of Florida was British at the time. It was a British colony, right?
right,
And of course, not on the side of George Washington.
right. And what first intrigued me about the letters, not only that Washington is concerned about St. Augustine, but that Congress is concerned as well. And this was the first of 81 letters that I've found so far where Washington cites St. Augustine either as a military target or a military concern.
It's amazing. Great history. I know that people can find out more information about the St. Augustine Annual History Festival online.
Mhm.
Roger Smith, Jessica Clark, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh,
Thank
this
you.
is great.